I'm really bummed out because I felt like kind of disappointed by Kingdom Hearts 3. I had fun. It was, you know, it was enjoyable, but there's a lot of stuff there that it kind of disappointing. I don't really know if I want to write a full review right now. You know, I'm real busy with my life, so I figured let's just talk about it a little bit. By the way, I'm gonna spoil everything, so if you haven't played the game yet, don't watch this. I'm gonna ruin it for you. Anyway, here we go. You know, Kingdom Hearts is known as a series that takes Disney and Final Fantasy characters and mushes them together in this really nice, really entertaining mishmash of weird, and it's great. And it's one of the things that we love about this series very much. But Kingdom Hearts 3, it doesn't have any Final Fantasy characters in it. Heck, it doesn't even have any Square Enix characters in it. I mean, there's some Moogles, there's a really nice Cactar reference, and in the toy store, there's this really cute little Final Fantasy display with some, like, you know, Bahamut and some big boys there you could take a look at that are also really expensive, and I found that to be really funny for some reason. But that's it! That's the only Final Fantasy characters in the game. Sora doesn't have any closure with, you know, Leon or Aerith or Cloud or any of the other Final Fantasy friends that show up. You don't even get to go to Radiant Garden and see how those boys are doing. You don't do that, which is a bummer. Even worse, there's no secret Sephiroth fight. You know, the thing that the Kingdom Hearts series is like famous for, one of the coolest and most entertaining things about the series, that's just not there. Instead, you get big heartless boy with two swords. It's a series that's supposed to mishmash Disney and Final Fantasy together, but they don't do that. There ain't no Final Fantasy in the game. And that's weird. And it made me sad. I wanted to fight HD Sephiroth. But I guess Square wants me to buy the Final Fantasy VII remake, which will never ever come out. One thing that really disappointed me was that they told us all of the worlds before the game came out. In all the trailers and all the previews and stuff, like, you can see and clearly identify every single world that's gonna exist in the game. There's no surprises. When I hit the end of the game and I was like, oh yeah, I beat all these worlds, they were lots of fun. Those were all the worlds that were in the trailer. I can't wait to see what worlds weren't announced, and then the game was over. And I was like, oh, that's all that's in the game. If you watch the trailers, and if you were keeping up with trailers because you wanted to get excited about a game you waited over a decade for, you got spoiled on all the worlds that would be in the game. Square Enix just told us all of the worlds that are in the game, and that sucks. There's nothing to discover. There's no surprises. Speaking of the worlds, I'm really bummed out about the selection. Yeah, some of them were really great, but some of them are really stupid. I understand that the beginning of the story is like, oh yeah, Sora, he's a weak boy. He's gotta get strong. The first thing he would think is, I'm gonna go to Hercules Land, go talk to Danny DeVito, and get myself powered up. But it's Olympus Coliseum. We've been there like every single game. It's done to death. Also, why the fuck did they put Pirates of the Caribbean in there? Arguably, it's one of the worst worlds in the game. So it's got this awful swimming combat, this boat combat that isn't really that developed at all. You're supposed to level up your boat by collecting fucking crabs? I'm already leveling up Sora and Donald and Goobert. I don't got time to put crabs in a boat. Do you remember the part where Sora fucking dies and then goes to Square Enix test lab and has to collect a bunch of himself like it's a fucking Banjo-Kazooie game? Do you remember the part where Kingdom Hearts 3 came out and it doesn't have any new music? I mean, it technically has new music and it sounds really great, but they're all remixes. I mean, the worlds have themes, but like, you know what there's no like new like Kingdom Hearts tracks, you know? It's not like, there's no new like or like there's none of that shit. Do you remember the part where you beat the 7 worlds and you're like, oh yeah, I can't wait to see what new and exciting worlds await me in this exciting $60 Kingdom Hearts 3 game I just bought? And then the game ends. Do you remember the part where we all bought the story so far so we could understand what's going on in this fucking convoluted story? And we're like, okay, there's a mobile game. This movie explains the story. And it was like, all right. And then you play Kingdom Hearts 3 and it's like, hey guys, you beat the mobile game, right? And it's like, no. And then they're like, too bad. Do you remember the part where everyone fucking dies and Sora has to go rescue their souls and you have to fight this really annoying Heartless that, like, if you use the lock-on system is a fucking nightmare, and even if you don't, Sora won't hit the fucker, and it's just the worst thing. You have to fight him like 6 times. Do you remember the part where Danny DeVito shows up and you're like, oh, it's Danny DeVito, my friend, and then he doesn't speak and he's like all mute and like going like and you're like, I want to hear your wonderful sultry tones, but he doesn't speak because they couldn't hire a sound-alike. Do you remember the part where Maleficent and Pete were in the fucking Kingdom Hearts series? I don't. Do you remember the part where you beat Handsome Card Boy and he gives you a card and he's like, Sora, this will be a card that will save your life or some shit. And Sora's like, okay. Kairi? And he takes a card, but then nothing fucking happens with that and it goes nowhere. Do you remember the part where Kairi is like raised up to be like this really cool character and they're like, hey Kairi, you're gonna be a Keyblade warrior. And she's like, oh boy, I'm gonna be a character in this game. And then she just fucking dies. Do you remember the part where everyone dies and then time resets and then it basically happens again, but it doesn't happen that time? And it's like a whole part of the game that could have just been copied and deleted from the script and nothing would have changed. Yeah, why was that in the game? Who's the girl that Axel and Blue Hair McGee are talking about? It's not Shion. Who's the girl? How'd they get Shion? Who remembered Shion? Where did they get her? You can't just go to the store and get Shion. Do you remember the part where Larxene was dying and she's like, man, I was just going along for the ride. And Sora's like, well, why the fuck would you do that? And she's like, I'll never tell. And then she fucking dies. Do you remember the part where you go to Big Hero 6 land and they're like, hey, Sora, this is a sequel to our movie, and it's, like, actually really great. And you go to Toy Story Land, and it's like, hey, this is a sequel to our movie, and it's actually really great. And then you go to Tangled and Frozen, and they're like, we're just gonna do the movie again. Do you remember the part where Xehanort has Kairi, and they're like, Kairi! And he's like, I have to kill her so that Sora's motivated. And I'm like, Nomura, you wrote that without a sense of irony, didn't you? Do you remember the part where you go up to Tangled, and you're like, hey, I want to dance? And she's like, yeah. And then you dance, and it's really fucking fun. That's not a negative, by the way. That's just, I just really like that part. Do you remember the part where you go to Monsters Inc. and Randall comes back, but then they defeat Randall and Sora, like, locks him in the dimension of, like, that's kind of fucked up. Do you remember the part where you get Stitch as a summon and you're like, yay, I got my boy Stitch, and then you use the summon and you're like, oh. Do you remember the part where they're like, oh man, we have to get Naminé back, and then they just get her back in like the credits and there's just kind of like no payoff for that? They're just kind of like, oh yeah, Naminé. Boop. Do you remember the part where Mark Hamill was hiding inside of a boy? Do you remember the part where you go to fight Xehanort, the old fucking man, and he's like, I'm going to wear this Tetsura Nomura armor and it's gonna be great. I'm a ram. Bah! Do you remember the part in the final boss where you have to do underwater combat on the final fucking boss? Do you remember when Kingdom Hearts 2, when you have the big fight with all the Heartless in Hollow Bastion, and it's like this big war and Goofy fucking dies, and it was really embarrassing? You remember that? Well, do you remember the part in Kingdom Hearts 3 where Nomura's like, hey, let's kill Donald? Do you remember the part where Chip and Dale... Do you remember the part where, like, this is a game that's been in development for, like, a million years, but it still feels somehow, like, rushed and unfinished? They had to patch in the final secret cutscene of the game because they forgot. Do you remember the part where Resident Evil 2 Remake is, like, 6 hours long and it feels, like, complete and, like, a full experience and it's really fun and, like, an excellent, awesome remake that, like, we were waiting for like a million years to come out and it turned out really great and it's really good and it's pretty great. And then you play Kingdom Hearts 3 and it's like 30 hours and you're still waiting for the game to start. Yeah, I was just a little disappointed with Kingdom Hearts 3 and that makes me sad. I mean, it's still, I would argue it's still like, you know, a good game, but now I just want to play Kingdom Hearts 2 again. Anyway, I'm gonna go sleep for 1,000 years. I hope you like this stupid video. Have a good night, everybody. I love you.